Good morning, my friends. Cheryl Critchbaum here. It is day 21 on 40 days of worship to end abortion. And I was supposed to be on here yesterday, day 20, for this devotional. But that just goes to show how tired I was yesterday morning and feeling a little down. And so I worshiped and I had a little at-home communion. You can tell I'm not Catholic, but my justification is that the New Testament does say that we are all priests. And so I do have communion elements at home. And so I blessed the bread and took communion and felt so much better. But I was still really tired and did not remember that I was supposed to do a devotion until late last night. So here I am doing the days 20 and 21 devotion. And here we go. It is Remember the Man Caught in Adultery. So why would I title a chapter like that? Well, this is the part of our study where we consider how our audience looks at the abortion issue. If we're going to be the bridge, as my friend Cindy says, and talk to people about the abortion issue without getting into a political debate, then we need to really understand what their perspective is. And I do highly recommend that you leave politics out of it right now. Politics can come later, right? I changed my politics after I changed my perspective on abortion. Okay. So, I was pro-choice for many, many years. I don't think I would ever call myself pro-abortion, but I was definitely pro-choice, and I was an angry woman. And God is the one who converted me. And he's the one who showed me this devotional and how to put it together. So let's stop and consider the man caught in adultery. And we always start with prayer. Start your prayers the way you'd like, end them the way you would like. Jesus, he who brings justice, open my mind to understand the scriptures. Humiliated, John 8, 1 through 11. Early in the morning, Jesus went to the temple. People began crowding around him in the temple court, and he began to teach them. A commotion interrupted Jesus' teaching. The crowd turned to see scribes and Pharisees pulling a woman with disheveled hair into the court. "Let go of me, leave me alone," Then she saw Jesus and stood quietly, ashamed. Jesus looked at the woman's face with compassion, but she would not look up. A Pharisee said, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act." Another said, "In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say?" The scribes and Pharisees were testing Jesus so that they might have grounds for accusing him. The scribes and Pharisees were referring to Leviticus 20, verse 10, and Deuteronomy 22:22, which say that both the adulterer and adulteress shall surely be put to death. Jesus knew the law, so he knew the adulterer was missing from this accusation. Yet he didn't say a word. Instead, he drew their attention away from the women's nakedness and down to the ground. Perhaps Jesus gave a knowing look to the 12, who quietly covered the woman's nakedness. Everyone got closer to see what he was writing in the sand. Someone near Jesus read his words out loud, and one by one, the woman's accusers, the older ones first, walked away from the woman who was in the center of the court. They didn't leave the crowd, of course, because they wanted to see what Jesus would do. What did he write in the sand? We don't know. Perhaps he quoted scripture. Jesus straightened up, looked the woman in the eye, and said, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "I do not condemn you either. Go and sin no more." What man? I purposely titled this section, Remember the Man Caught in Adultery, to get you to ask, what man? Exactly. Where is the man who was caught in the very act of adultery? The law of Moses said that both the man and the woman should be stoned, yet the man was not accused. Jesus elegantly distracted the crowd from the woman's shame, brought about justice, and showed her the path of righteousness. Micah 6:8 says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Today, women pregnant out of wedlock are the obvious sinners because of their growing bellies. They're like the scarlet letters of the Nathaniel Hawthorne's book. Men who have extramarital sex are harder to identify. Not only that, but men who are philanderers are often looked upon as studs. And pro-choice women recognize the unfairness. So let's do a little history lesson here. The 1960s. Let's go back to the 1960s, the decade before Roe v. Wade. The counterculture of the 1960s included the free love movement, which argued that sex freely entered into should not be judged by the church or regulated by law. The result of the free love movement? Promiscuity. What happens when couples have sex? Women get pregnant. It's simple biology. Remember, though, that in the 1960s, women did not have equal rights to work, and single moms did not receive child support from their children's father, if they knew who the father was. Gut check. When you heard me say, if she knew who the father was, did you begin judging her? Remember that promiscuity applies to both women and men. The men with whom she had sex probably had multiple sex partners and may have been happy to be anonymous. We need to acknowledge that both women and men participate in extramarital sex. So we either judge both of them or we leave the judging for God, as it says in Matthew 7:1, and of course this is Jesus speaking. Do not judge so that you will not be judged. In the 1960s, my mom was in her 20s and married. My parents were married, and my dad was finishing his degree, so my mom's income was their main income. She worked for an upscale department store, but couldn't be promoted to management because she was married and had 2 children at home, that is, my sister and brother. Mom became pregnant with me in early 1969, months before my dad finished his degree. And by this time, she worked for the church and worked only through her first semester. And I asked her why, and she said, because that's the way it was back then. In the 1970s, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the ACLU went to court trying case after case, resulting in women's equal rights to work. Watch the 2019 movie On the Basis of Sex, which is a snapshot of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life. It's a good reminder of what life was like for women in the 1970s. And while watching, remember that Roe v. Wade was decided before then, January 22nd, 1973. When the feminist movement changed from pro-life to pro-choice, women thought abortion would be rare but necessary so that women were not left destitute because they couldn't work. And they couldn't insist that the baby's father and support them and their children because there were no laws like that. But we do have them today. Allowing abortion seemed the fair thing to do for women. I want you to let that sink in. Now you stop and think about it. My mom was the one bringing in the income, and she's pregnant with me, and she only worked through the first semester. No Family Leave Act, to provide her with any sort of support. No, there was no extra support. They were left with my dad's income only once she hit second trimester with me. Now, my mom was married. Imagine a woman who doesn't know who the father is, or the father rejects his responsibilities. What is she going to do? She has no income. There was no equal rights to work, so there were fewer jobs that she could get. She certainly couldn't get paid as much. And even though we are not at the point where we are completely equal in our wages, we are pretty close, much closer than we were in the 60s and 70s. And you may not like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and you may not like ACLU, but what they did granted women the rights to work. Granted women the right to work. All right, so we have The Woman Caught in Adultery, which is the title most of us know. And I have it crossed out, and I changed it to Jesus Saves a Woman from Injustice. Why do we call this Bible story The Woman Caught in Adultery? Jesus did not give it that title. The Apostle John, who wrote that gospel, did not give it that title. In truth, an editor wrote that title. Well, I'm an editor, and I propose a new title: Jesus Saves a Woman from Injustice. Amos 5:24. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. All right, so clearly I need to expand this chapter and provide more context. But here's the deal. Roe v. Wade came about because women were stuck in very difficult situation. And we need to recognize that. We also need to recognize that women are treated differently when they are pregnant outside of wedlock than men. We need to recognize that it's obvious that a woman's pregnant, and she gets asked questions like, when are you getting married? Are you married? Starts asking questions about the dad, and there are all sorts of different situations. And ideally, all pregnancies would happen within marriage, but we know the reality that they don't. That's the way it is today. Our goal is to change that, of course, but in the meantime, we need to have compassion so that we can end abortion. But we also need to understand the history, and there will be more history in the coming days. But we need to understand the history so that when we are talking to other people, we can point out that all the reasons that existed in the 1960s and 70s for having Roe v. Wade no longer exist. And there's my dog having a fit about something out on the road. All right, so here's the deal. We need to get educated, and we need to be compassionate, and we need to remember that it takes both men and women to get pregnant. It's biology. All right, let's go back to our prayers. Oh, back up. Okay, so prayer that was intended for yesterday is based on John 8:1-11, Amos 5:24, Micah 6:8, and Isaiah 1:17. So once again, start your prayers the way you would like, end your prayers the way you would like. Father, let me remember what it takes to get pregnant. Thank you for reminding me not to condemn the woman caught in adultery or the unseen man, but instead gently bring them both back to righteousness, saying, go and sin no more. Father, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Open my eyes to the injustices committed between the sexes, whether it is an unwillingness to pay child support, pressure to abort, coercion, abuse, rape, or sex trafficking. Father, show me how you want me to seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the cause of orphans, and fight for the rights of single parents. Father, thank you for protecting the 40 Days for Life worship warriors who seek abortion, help the oppressed, and defend the preborn. All right, tomorrow I will be back with Pray for Your Country. Have a blessed day.